Hi class, welcome back to my class of International Macroeconomics. I'm Dr. Liu from Jiangxi University of Finance and Economics. Today we will learn the facts that affect countries' choices of exchange rate regimes. First, let us talk about why do some countries use fixed exchange rate while others are using floating exchange rate, and why do they change their minds during different periods. These are the main problems to be solved in this chapter, and they are also one of the most persistent and controversial issues in international macroeconomics. To solve this problem, we will investigate the advantages and disadvantages of different exchange rate policies. You must have heard about the golden standard. Its standard economic unit of account is based on a fixed quality of gold, namely, the monetary value per unit is equivalent to a certain weight of gold. As the earliest monetary regime, gold standard was prevalent during 1880 to 1914. And numbers of countries adopted this system. So the exchange rates between their currencies were calculated by gold parity. Accordingly, gold standard has ensured the unification of global market and stabilization of foreign exchange market, performing as a relatively stable monetary system. This figure shows the exchange rates regime of the world during 1870 to 2007. The shadowed areas show the proportion of countries adopting each exchange rate regime, and finally adds up to 100%. From 1870 to 1913, the gold standard became the dominant regime. During World War I, most countries suspended the gold standard and it was recovered for a short time in the late 1920s. After the World War II, a majority of countries adopted fixed exchange rates against the USD. Moreover, the pound, franc, and market blocks were indirectly pegged to the USD. Since the 1970s, more and more countries have chosen to float. In 1999, the euro replaced the franc and the market and became a base currency for money pegs. As we see, countries chose different exchange rate regimes at different times. So a core question of this chapter is, what is the best exchange rate regime for a given country at a given time? To solve this, we will explore the pros and cons of fixed exchange rate and floating exchange rates, and we will combine the models we have developed with other theories and evidence. We will begin with the choices of Germany and Britain in the early 1990s. This history highlights the process of policy markets chose from pegs and the floats. First, let's explore Britain. Britain shifted from peg to float in September 1992. At the same time, European Union members pushed for a common currency across Europe, considering as an important part of Europe's single market. The fixed exchange rate system created in 1979 called the Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM, was the foundation of euro. In the fixed exchange rate system, the German mark was the central currency. European Exchange Rate Mechanism, we can call it as EMR for short, was established in 1979 and aims to prevent EU members' currency from fluctuating. The approach was setting a fixed central rate for member countries' currencies and allowing them to fluctuate in certain ranges. In addition, countries should maintain their exchange rate being higher or lower than the central rate within a range of 15% for 2 years, and then they would join the EU. As for Britain, it was allowed to stay in or drop out from ERM. So the critical point was whether there was an external impact, would stay in ERM benefit Britain or not. According to the ISLM model, we can analyze the impacts on Britain's foreign exchange rate and outputs. To consider the external impact was from Germany. The reunification imposed a heavy physical burden on Germany, but West Germans were willing to pay this cost to see their country united. As we know from the previous chapter, an increase in German government consumption G can be represented as a shift to the right of Germany's IS curve. But in order to maintain the exchange rate, the central bank had to tighten the monetary policy. So LM shifts left and the German interest rate rises from I1 to I2. Under a fixed exchange rate system, since foreign returns has increased, to stabilize the exchange rate, the UK must increase domestic returns as well. The rise of German interest rate also shifts out Britain's IS curve slightly from IS1 to IS2. To maintain this peg, Britain had to tighten the money supply, so the domestic returns would rise. And Britain's LM curve shifts up from LM1 to LM2. Under the same exchange rate and a higher interest rate, demands fall and output drops from Y1 to Y2. Hence, the equilibrium moves from point 1 to point 2. To sum up, the situation of Britain seems to be worse. By contrast, if the UK adopts a floating exchange rate system while foreign interest rate rises, the UK doesn't have to keep the exchange rate fixed. It can arbitrarily increase or decrease the money supply, thereby accordingly adjusting outputs and exchange rates. For example, at LM4, the British interest rates hold at I1 and output booms, but the foreign exchange market ends up at 0.4. And there is a depreciation of the pound to E4. The British could also select LM3, stabilize output at the initial level Y1, but the peg still has to break with E racing to E3. So what happened in reality? Following an economic slowdown, in September 1992, the British Conservative found the benefits of being ERM and the Euro project were smaller than costs suffered due to the rises of German interest rate. Finally, Britain opted out ERM. You may wonder if Britain made the right choice. In Figure 8-3, we will compare the economic performance between Britain and France. But France maintained its ERM peg. Britain's monetary policy was more expansionary after exiting the ERM in September 1992, while other ERM countries still pegged to the mark, such as France, monetary policy had to be tighter. Consistent with the model, Britain had lower interest rate more depreciated currency and faster output growth compared to France after 1992. Could we say Britain made the right decision, but others did not? Actually, the cause between the different choices is each country faces different shocks. The financial shock of German reunification was not suffered by the UK or any other ERM country. The term economic integration means the growth of market linkages in good, capital, and labor markets among regions and countries. Generally, we believe by lowering transaction costs, a fixed exchange rate might promote integration and hence increase economic efficiency. What is the reason? The answer is greater the degree of economic integration between markets, the greater volume of their transactions, and the greater benefits of PEG. Thus, as an integration rises, the efficiency of common currency increases. Let's look at the process of European integration. France and Germany promoted the establishment of European Coal and Steel Community in 1952. It performed as a trade union and was the rudiment of EU. In 1965, it extended to European Economic Community and included some Western European countries such as Britain. Led by Germany, in 1993, EEC became European Commission that cooperated in politics, democracy, and security. In 1999, Euro was regarded as the common currency and was further progress of European integration. As we see, Germany has gradually played a dominant role in such process, especially when EU was suffered from European debt crisis. To be specific, whilst Germany led to the European integration, the reason might be at that time, Western Germany was under control of Britain, US, and France, while East Germany was ordered by former Soviet Union. Fixed exchange rates can lead to costs because asymmetric shocks to a certain country are not shared by other countries. In our case, German policymakers want to offset the application by tightening monetary policy. However, British policymakers did not want to do the same because they have experienced the same shock. A universal lesson we can learn is if a country pegs to a foreign currency, asymmetric shocks can result in costs in terms of reducing outputs. To conclude, the greater economic similarity between home and base country, the fewer asymmetric shocks they will face. In addition, with the growth of economic similarities, the cost of stabilizing the common currency decreases. Above discussion brings about the following conclusion. With the improvement of integration, the efficiency of common currency increases. What is more, as symmetry rises, the cost of staying in the common currency decreases. As we can predict countries above the fixed line can obtain economic benefits from PEGs. Otherwise, countries will suffer from that. Combined with the purchasing power parity theory we have learned in former chapters, we will come to the same conclusion in the long run, as point 1 to 6 in the figure. They represent the pair of locations. Supposing one location is pegging its exchange rate to its partner. As their markets become more integrated, in other words, the pair moves to the right along the horizontal axis. Or, they experience more symmetric economic shocks as the pair move up on the vertical axis. The net economic benefits of fixed exchange rate will increase as well. If the pair moves far enough up or to the right, the benefits of fixed exceed cost. Then the pair will cross the fixing threshold. We name it as the fixed line. Well, the pair is below the line, it is optimal for the country to float. Otherwise, it is optimal to fix. Then we talk about the process of European integration. We mentioned in the trade union, in fact, fixed exchange rate might boost trade by eliminating trade hindering frictions. According to the statistics, as all else equal, a pair of countries adopting the gold standard has 30% to 100% higher bilateral trade levels than comparable pairs of other countries. Thus, it appears that the gold standard did promote trade. What about the fixed exchange rate today? Do they still promote trade? Economists have tested this hypothesis. In the following case, there were two countries, A and B, and they were classified in 4 different ways. First, the two countries are using a common currency. For example, A and B are in a currency union where A has unilaterally adopted B's currency, such as Ecuador uses USD. Second, the two countries are linked by a direct exchange rate peg. For instance, A's currency is pegged to B's, such as overseas French francs are pegged to euro. Third, the two countries are linked by an indirect exchange rate peg through a third currency. For example, A and B have currencies pegged to C but not directly to each other. Like some African countries, peg their currencies to euro respectively. Fourth, the two countries are not linked by any type of peg. It means their currencies float against one another, even if one or both of them pegged to some other third currency, such as the relationship between USD and euro. Some currencies put USD and euro into foreign currency basket and peg to their combination, but we cannot find there is any direct impact between USD and euro themselves. In this chart, the statistic compared the volumes of trade in situation 1, 2, and 3 retrospectively to situation 4. As we mentioned, situation 4 represents floating exchange rate. The chart shows estimation of the impact on trade volumes of various types of fixed regimes. Indirect pegs were found to have a small but statistically insignificant impact on trade. But its trade volume increased by 21% compared to direct peg and by 38% compared to a currency union. We used to learn the law of one price. It means if there are no trade or transport barriers between countries, then they have the same purchasing power parity. Will this situation lead to the establishment of law of one price? To study the relationship between exchange rate mechanism and price convergence, we are going to use the law of one price and purchasing power parity as benchmarks, especially if we are talking about an integrated market. If a fixed exchange rate can promote trade, then we are expected to find that the price difference is less than between floating exchange rates. In other words, at a fixed exchange rate, we should find law of one price and purchasing power parity are more likely to behold under a floating regime. At a more macroeconomic level, economists also studied convergence in the prices of individual goods. They found the commodity price difference between fixed exchange rate countries is less than that between floating exchange rate countries. While a country is benefit from pegs, there is also some cost. When it's pegs, it gives up its independent monetary policy. It has to adjust the money supply at all times to ensure the home interest rate equals to the foreign interest rate. There will be a trilemma. A country can do the following to solve it. First, opting for open capital markets with fixed exchange rates, we call it open peg. Second, opting to open its capital market but allow the currency to float, we call it open non-peg. Third, opting to choose its capital markets, as closed capital markets can obtain the monetary autonomy. To be specific, the trilemma says in an open peg, the annual change in the domestic interest rate should be the same as that in the base country. Moreover, the points should lie on the 45-degree line like panel A shows. The evidence suggests nations with open pegs have less monetary independence. The trilemma also says there are two ways to let the autonomy back. First, switching to a floating exchange rate. Second, imposing capital controls. Panel B shows the first way improves home interest rate independence. And panel C shows the second way allows complete autonomy for the home country. From another perspective, fixing also impacts the output volatility. All other equal, an increase in the interest rate of the benchmark country will lead to a decline in production of related countries. By contrast, floating countries don't have to follow the base interest rate, and they can use their monetary policy autonomy to stabilize the rate. Hence, one cost of fixed regime is more volatile level of output. To combine with the recent empirical study, it has found the impact of higher interest rate in base countries is related to large output losses in fixed rate countries. However, in floating rate countries, they are not. For example, it can be seen that when a base country raises its interest rate by 1%, the average growth rate of GDP in a floating country is 0.05%, while the real GDP growth rate of a country with a fixed exchange rate is 0.12%, lower than the average.